Hey, Jeff, good to see you.
Hey, Chris.
Welcome to your first Patreon. Yay!
Yay.
So, I have to say that I noticed on Instagram and Facebook the other day that you had this wonderful picture of you playing Puck in Midsummer Night's Dream from eons ago with the
Mhm.
rippling abs and the shirt, the whole
Well,
bit.
let's not say eons ago, but
Okay, fine,
some.
fine. But the rippling abs and stuff, which I haven't seen for a little while, but I
I
know
never had rippling
they
abs.
look rippling in the picture, man. They look rippling in the picture. That's all I
I
can
guess
say.
it rippling, believe it or not.
Oh, there we go. There we go. So I'd like to ask you, can you tell us a little bit more about that production? Because it was a pretty historic production.
Well, yeah, it was in a way. You know, that production was from the fall of 1987 into the spring of 1988 for an off-Broadway production and one at the Public. It actually had a pretty long run because actually it was extended. It was supposed to run a certain amount, maybe 6 to 8 weeks, and then it was extended for twice that much because it was that successful. The reason it was historic was it was the first production of a Shakespeare marathon. I don't know if you remember this.
No.
That Joseph Papp decided to do. He had already done, I mean, his work at the Public went back to the early 60s, and now we're talking about 1987. So this is 25 years later, but he had already done all the Shakespeare plays, but now he set out to do all the Shakespeare plays one after another. It was known as the marathon. This production of A Midsummer Night's Dream that I was fortunate enough to get cast in was the first of the marathon. I remember the one after ours was Julius Caesar, starring Al Pacino.
Ooh.
Al Pacino, Martin Sheen.
Wow.
And a whole John McMartin, Ed Herman, Damian Leake, and a ton of other great people. That was the one after ours. In fact, at one point we took one of the major magazines, I think New York Magazine, took a photo of the two casts together, and I'm standing right behind Al Pacino. That was the first time I got to meet him. But so it was a historic production, the first in the marathon. They ended up doing all of them over the course of many years in a row. Yeah, so it had a special significance. And as I said, I'm not sure, but it may have been the only one. I don't know. It was certainly one of the few of the productions that was extended.
Gotcha. Well, probably because there were fewer, but some big name actors in yours. So why don't you tell us who some of your co-stars
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, actually, before I get to that, because it was extended, I had to miss some of the extended part of the run because I had a commitment to do that play Dumas about Alexander Dumas and his
in
son,
Philadelphia,
in which I played the son in Philadelphia. So I had to miss about 6 weeks or so I was out of the show for some weeks. And do you remember who my replacement was?
I have no idea.
John Leguizamo.
Really? Wow, that must have been fascinating.
John Leguizamo was my replacement. I had an understudy, but they didn't use my understudy. They got John, which was really cool. Anyway, yeah, quite an incredible cast. Carl Lumbly was the first Oberon. He was replaced, I think, when the extension happened or something like that, by a somewhat illustrious actor named Joe Morton. Those two actors played Oberon. Lorraine Toussaint played Titania.
She was great.
And the lovers, it was a racially stratified production, not in terms of, not in any weird bad way, but AJ Antoon, the director, who died unfortunately within 5 years of doing the production, AJ Antoon cast the play with Europeans in Brazil as the lovers and Black Brazilians of color as the fairy world. So in that way, the cast was stratified, right? So on one side, you had Carl Lumley, Joe Morton, Lorraine Toussaint, and a host of wonderful young actors who played fairies, including a wonderful dancer named Byron Easley and a young actress doing one of her first professional shows named Sarah Erday, who came out of Performing Arts High School. She was a classmate of Jennifer Aniston's. Wonderful dancers and actors. We were choreographed by the great Garth Fagan. And which was quite a wonderful experience. And on the other side, you had the Europeans, represented by no less than Elizabeth McGovern as Helena, a wonderful actor named Julia. I'll have her other name in a moment. Julia was Hermia. One moment, Julia, there she is. Julia Gibson. Bruce Norris was Demetrius. He ended up becoming a playwright and wrote that play, Something Park, a very famous play that was won prizes and ran all over the place. I'm
sure you can look it up on your phone.
Not MacArthur Park. It was a very successful play. Anyway, it became very successful. Rob Nepper was Lysander. And then you had the Mechanicals, of course, led by F. Murray Abraham, who just 5 years earlier, or 4 or 5 years earlier, had won the Academy Award Best Actor for playing Salieri in Amadeus. He was Bottom, and a whole bunch of wonderful actors, including Steve Hoventhal and Richard Riley and Appel as... I'm just going to look up some names here as the Mechanicals. Joe Zaloom, Peter Appel, Tim Perez, Steve Hoventhal. Wonderful actor named Jack Ryland played Theseus, and Patty Holly played Hippolyta. Aegeus was played by Eric Avari. I don't want to leave out any of these names because these are all wonderful theater actors who also did film and television. So yeah, it was quite a cast, especially with F. Murray in the comic lead, and Elizabeth McGovern, who is an absolute divine Helena.
Well, I have to tell you a funny Elizabeth McGovern story.
Okay,
because it's relevant to this. So it must have been maybe 6 months after this production. I don't know if it was 6 months after the end of the extension, but it was about 6 months after I had seen you in it, and was blown away by your Puck. It was just so cool. But
thank you.
You're welcome. So I'm going to a doctor's office on the east side of Manhattan to get my eyes checked, and I get into an elevator, and this woman gets in, and she's standing next to me, and I look at her, and I'm like, I know her. Where do I know her from? And she looks at me, and I can tell her face is going, I know him. Where do I know him from? But he's not. No, maybe he is. And I looked at her. I said, hi, I saw you in Midsummer Night's Dream. You were great. She said, thank you. And I think she was kind of freaked out because she thought I was you.
Weren't you in it too?
Exactly. But it was a very funny moment.
Elizabeth McGovern.
Yes, it was definitely.
We ended up living like 4 blocks from each other on the Upper West Side a few years later.
Okay.
Clyburn Park was the name of the play by Bruce Norris. Clyburn Park, which did all kinds of awards and runs all over the country. I actually just a funny thing about that. I shaved my entire body for that production. In fact, I think I ended up having to do it more than once because of the extension. I had to a refresh, but I shaved all the hair off my body for Puck. And as you know, Chris, I'm rather hirsute by nature, so it was no small project.
We won't even touch that. Oh, sorry. So tell me,
I was afraid that it wouldn't grow back, by the way, because it took a while to grow back, especially after the second time I did it. It took a while. I was a little concerned there. Yeah.
Really?
But it did come back in all.
Yeah, that concern was addressed. I got you. So how did you end up getting involved with the show originally?
Well, by an audition, I got an audition. Back up a little bit, history. I had been working at the Public already quite a bit. because I don't know if you recall that you probably recall that I was in that company with Estelle Parsons.
Yes.
The multi-ethnic Shakespeare company, which was for a whole year and a half, from late 1985, right about the same time, almost exactly at the same time that I got the Cosby Show, by the way. Late 1985, September, October 1985, all the way through 1986 and into 1987, through May, I think, of 1987, I was with this multi-ethnic Shakespeare company, directed by Estelle Parsons, produced by Joseph Papp, with wonderful actors. Oh my gosh, so many people came through that company, including Delroy Lindo, and Keith David worked with us, and wonderful Puerto Rican actress named Yvonne Call, Rocky Carroll, so many great people. Regina Taylor, the playwright, actress playwright.
I remember meeting her when she was very young. Yes.
Yeah. All in that company together. So I did that for the whole. I mean, I took a break at one point because I think that was the break I took because I directed King Lear. I took a break, but I was in that company other than that for that whole time. Then I went right into a summer production in the park of Richard II, in which I played a small role in one of the Delacorte productions.
Yes, and very infamous production in some ways, but we'll come back to that. Keep going.
Okay.
Well, that was, I'll just say, that was the one where the theater reviewer, the critic for the
John Simon
wrote that piece that was so ridiculous.
For New York, not New Yorker.
Okay, New York Magazine.
For New York Magazine. Wrote a piece in which he basically said that blacks should not do Shakespeare.
Yes. That was pretty friggin' amazing.
To which I wrote a reply, which I wish to this day they had published, because part of my reply was a song called White Shakespeare to be sung to the tune of White Christmas. I'm dreaming of a white Shakespeare with every ethnic out of sight, with no blacks reciting and something lighting, the whole thing.
So it was Shakespeare for Trump. Well, I bet you'll find it in your papers, and you should definitely re-record it for us.
The end was. May your verse be merry and light, and may all your Shakespeare plays be white. Right. Anyway, that was horrendous. But yeah, that production, which was another star-studded production. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Incredible people in that show. Victor Love, Tom Aldridge. Marion Seldes. Peter McNichol in the lead, John Bedford Lloyd, on and on and on. Wonderful people. Judith Molina. So I did that, and then actually it was while I was doing that, I was about to do another show in the park, Henry IV, Part 1, which is actually chronologically comes right after Richard II, and I got the contract on Cosby. Cosby offered me the contract. And they needed me not to do the play in the park because I needed to be available once I was on contract. So I actually had to drop out of Henry IV Part 1. I was going to play Bardolph, which was really disappointing. But, hey.
Right.
Cosby contract called. So, but when the fall came around and they were casting for A Midsummer Night's Dream, I was very high on the lists of people to, especially when A.J. Antoon decided to go with a completely cast of color for the Fairyland in Midsummer. I became a candidate. Actually, originally, A.J. Antoon did not originally have that concept because I originally auditioned for Lysander.
Oh.
In fact, I believe I auditioned possibly twice for Lysander before being asked to audition for Puck, which indicates that A.J. Antoon and Papp did not have the racially stratified concept in mind from the beginning. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been seen for Lysander, right?
Right.
But eventually I was seen for Puck, and I I got cast as Puck. That's the backstory to that.
Cool. But so, all right. So you cast as Puck, and you talked about the diversity, ethnically, racially, etc.
Yeah.
From your perspective, was that diversity something that added dimensions to the play? Speaking as a Shakespearean scholar and teacher as you are, was that something that definitely added to the play, or was it just a neutral factor?
No, it definitely added to the play. I mean, I thought that the casting, I thought the idea was very clever. I thought the idea was very clever to have, the white Europeans and then the black spirit, the black spirit world.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was a wonderful idea, and it allowed just this whole crowd of wonderful actors of color to work in Shakespeare. Now Joseph Papp had a pretty good track record for diversity, in Shakespeare. He's the guy who championed James Earl Jones in Shakespeare a number of times, whose birthday it was last week, by the way. He's 91.
Yes.
And all, Papp did a lot for racial diversity in casting in classical theater. So that was nothing new to the public. But to have this entire block of actors of color, on one side of the play was kind of cool. Led by Lumley and Morton and Lorraine Toussaint and the choreography of Garth Fagan.
So wait, other than the Cosby Show, was that your first experience having that sort of those sorts of numbers of actors of color all in the same production with you?
Yeah, I would probably, because Cosby was my first television experience.
Right.
Midsummer wasn't my first. No, there were a lot of people of color. A number of people of color in Richard II to a certain extent. In Henry IV, which I didn't get to do. I think Alfred Woodard was in Henry IV, Part 1, the one that I had to bow out of. So no, and then of course the Shakespeare company that I came from Estelle Parsons, was completely diverse.
Right.
In fact, it was there were relatively few Caucasian actors in that company. So I was coming from that whole, but that was something that was very cool about the public theater at the time, and I think still, that they kind of led the way in a way where that was concerned.
Cool. So we're talking about 1987, 1988.
Yeah.
As you look back on it now, was the overall experience of being in that production a good one? Or sort of an okay one? Are there any specific moments that stand out for you in the production?
It was great. It was a wonderful experience. It was wonderful. I mean, in fact, it was one of those things that, I was too young to, just like the Cosby Show, I was too young and inexperienced to really appreciate. I did appreciate it. I wasn't cavalier about it. I wasn't, but as time has gone on, when I look back at experiences like the Cosby Show and this production of Midsummer Night's Dream, it's like, oh my God, what I was a part of was just astonishing. It was a wonderful experience. There was nothing negative about it. I think the only negative thing that happened, if I can remember, was when I had to, I had it in my contract that I had to, in case there was an extension of the show, that I had to do the show in Philly. But the director, for some reason, wasn't aware of that. So when I told him that I wasn't going to begin the extension, he was actually very upset at me, and it was kind of tense. Once he was actually told that it was actually in my contract, I for some reason, either I or my agent had the foresight to just kind of safeguard in case it was extended, that I had this out, for whatever. So once he realized that it was, a pre-done thing, there was no hard feelings. But for a while, it was kind of tense. Other than that, I can't recall anything bad. There were a lot of wonderful experiences. One not wonderful experience, but kind of interesting, a little bit frightening experience, was the night that Carl Lumley's hair caught on fire.
Whoa.
He did this little magic trick as Oberon that involved fire. And one performance, he either did it too close to him or leaned too close to the trick or whatever, but all of a sudden the top of his hair was smoking.
A Michael Jackson moment.
Yes. And a woman in the front row at the Ansbacher Theater ran up onto the stage and put it out. batted it out with her program or something. At least that's what I recall. For some reason, Carl was so into what he was doing, he didn't realize his hair was on fire.
That reminds me of a story from Beaver Dam Lake, which when I was at my own birthday party and I was being cavalier and I threw the candle, the match up in the air after I lit the candles for my birthday, and the candle came down on my head, and I had a big afro at the time, and I had no idea that my afro was smoking.
How did you?
It can happen.
Did you just run into the bathroom? Was you stuck?
No, we were outside downstairs by the pump house. So my classmates.
You ran to the lake. Did you run to the lake?
My classmates and mom, grabbed my head and put it out.
Oh, toweled you out.
But it was those things can happen. You'd be surprised.
So you can relate.
I can relate. Yes, to both to Michael and to Carl. So
I wish I could remember more specifics about good, nice things, because it was just a lovely feeling in the cast. Between everybody, I hear you. It's terrific,
I hear you. So again, looking back, and you've seen and or participated in other productions of Midsummer Night's Dream.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it's funny because I've done 3. I did that one as Puck, and then years later in Arizona. Remember, I went to Arizona. Yep. I was part of the Grand Canyon Shakespeare. Right. I played 2 plays in repertory: Romeo in Romeo and Juliet, and Theseus, the Duke, in Midsummer.
And then you did Midsummer Night's Dream again in L.A., right?
In L.A., I did Midsummer, and I was fortunate enough to be able to do Bottom. Did you get to see that? No. I think mom might have come to see. But anyway, I did Bottom, and that was the Theseus production was okay. But the production that we did in LA was a lot of fun, extremely diverse production racially, and I got to do Bottom, which I'd always wanted to do, and that was a hoot.
Definitely. I can see you in it. I'm sure it was wonderful.
Yeah, to say that I chewed the scenery is probably an understatement. It's probably on film. All of these productions are probably on film. Maybe not the Arizona one.
But certainly, they may not be.
I've actually seen the public one. You can see it at Lincoln Center in the library. And the LA one, I'm sure, was filmed. Yeah. Right.
But they're not, I mean, to see them, you don't get to see them on Netflix. You have to sort of
you have to go to the Performing Arts Library.
Right, because they're protected by contracts and stuff.
Yeah.
So and it's funny that role of Bottom is so critical. I don't know if you watched the series Blue Bloods at all, but there's a character in Blue Bloods who plays one of the top guys to the commissioner, and my introduction to him was when he played Bottom in an outdoor production in New Jersey of Midsummer Night's Dream, and he was absolutely hysterical. So seeing him as this top guy cop, playing the cop role, it makes me laugh every time.
Do you remember his name?
I'm terrible with names.
Okay. And where did you see it? Was it Jersey Shakespeare Festival?
It was outdoors in something that looked. It was an outdoor amphitheater type thing. It was somewhere in the middle of New Jersey.
In Madison, maybe at Keene?
Yes. That's right. I went I took the boys and New Jersey Shakespeare Festival. Right. And it was outdoors. It was a good production. It was lots of fun. But
I worked with them years ago.
This actor was one of them. But that role of Bottom, it sort of sets you up for all kinds of things.
Was he a big guy by any chance? Roly-poly guy?
I wouldn't say he was huge.
Okay. Because they had a very big comic actor there for a while who was very good. Who played do the Falstaffs and the
I'll look him up and I'll let you know. So what other compared to those other productions you've been in, or compared to other productions that you've seen, How was the 1987
I
production for
think the
you?
one I was in 1987, 88 was particularly good and strong. I've seen so many productions of Midsummer Night's Dream, and I can't remember any one of them being, well, of course, it's hard to judge because I was in it, but um, I remember, for instance, another production of Midsummer Night's Dream that the public did in the park, a very star-studded production with tons of movie stars in it. I'm not going to mention any names. Some of them were good and some of them weren't, but it was kind of a mess. It was kind of like everyone was doing their own thing, you know. Um, it didn't work. I've seen a lot of productions like that. The concept of ours really held together so well. It was so well conceived, you know, the racial thing, the political, racial, sociological thing was so well conceived. And AJ was a wonderful director. And I don't, as much as I've seen that play, I can't remember seeing another version of it that I've liked as much, including except the old film, which I love, the old film of it with Mickey Rooney and all those guys. But there's a weird film of it that was done maybe 20 years ago with a lot of stars, a really weird one where they have this weird bicycle motif throughout the whole thing. The director decided that bicycles were the most important thing. I'm not kidding you. If you see this version of it, it's very famous. Michelle Pfeiffer is in it.
Huh.
There's some good performances, but he's got these people riding bicycles in it as if that's like the main thing. You know, it's like, it was really weird. But I'll tell you, it was a couple of good people. Michelle Pfeiffer, coincidentally, was in that not good production of it at the public in the park. I saw, as a matter of fact. She was good, but cool. Do you know who Sam Rockwell is?
I know the name, but
if you saw his picture, you go, oh, that guy. He's one of my favorite actors. But before I realized who he was and before he was a favorite actor, he has a small part in that Midsummer Night's Dream film with the bicycles. He plays Thisbe. He plays flute / Thisbe in the mechanicals in the play, and he does something with Thisbe that no one has ever done that I've ever seen do Midsummer Night's Dream. He plays it completely straight.
Huh.
You know, the thing with the mechanicals doing that play is everyone tries to outdo each other with how clever and funny and zany it can be, including myself, guilty as charged. What Rockwell did, the director, and he plays it absolutely straight, not trying to get any laughs. Just this poor schmuck mechanical guy tries to play a woman in love just as straight as he can, and it's so moving. It's the standout moment of that film, and only later did I realize, when I looked it up, that was Sam Rockwell, who had by then become one of my favorite actors.
Very interesting. So, speaking as a teacher a little bit more, since you teach Shakespeare,
yes,
and by the way, you're allowed to plug your class, when we do these things. Yeah, it's up to you. But speaking as a teacher, for those who either don't know Midsummer Night's Dream as well, or who may not understand it, what is your take on the message of Midsummer Night's Dream? What was Shakespeare attempting to convey as the message of that play?
You know, Chris, I'm not a message person.
Okay. Are there messages plural?
I'm notorious for being a non-message person. Okay. To me, there is no message to Midsummer Night's Dream. It's just what it is. And I think every person who sees it might come away, if they come away with an overriding message. I mean, if I had to say something, I'd say the power of the imagination.
Okay.
You know, I think it might be encapsulated in a beautiful speech of Theseus's late in the play, where he talks about the poet, the madman, and the lover. There's a beautiful speech where he likens the three of them, the poet, the madman, and the lover, all, and it's a speech about imagination. But other than that, I don't know. I don't think I don't think it's funny. It's so weird to it's almost heresy to say that Shakespeare plays don't have messages. They have stories. and the story adds up to, you know, whatever the sum total of what the characters do and say in that play. That's what it's about. Sure, yeah. Othello is about jealousy to a certain extent. Lear is about rashness, you know. But to reduce these plays to kind of log lines or blog lines of thematic significance, to me, is a little bit ridiculous.
Well,
Not that your question is ridiculous,
no, I
because
don't
most
worry.
people might have an answer for that. But what is Midsummer Night's Dream about?
Well,
What?
here's my
The
question.
folly of youth, the power of the imagination, you know, fill in the blank.
Well, let me follow
All
up
of the above.
Let me follow up with this, though. When the director of the production you were in 87, 88, put together the cast, even though that may not have been the stratification, as you put it, racially, may not have been the original concept, but once it ended up that way, with essentially the people of color in one environment and the Europeans in another, do you believe that the director was attempting to send some kind of message given the roles that those two populations had?
Yes, I do. I do. The difference between the spirit world of the dark Brazilians and maybe a more foolish and superficial world of the European Brazilians. Remember, Puck's line, "Lord, what fools these mortals be," is directed at the lovers, you know, which in this case were white European, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I'm sure he did have something in mind. In fact, for every production of a Shakespeare play I've ever been in, the director has had a speech about something akin to about what it means,
which you don't necessarily always agree with.
Which I sit through dutifully and nod my head, and you know, usually extremely articulate and eloquent.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and like, okay, that's what it means to you right now in this room. Do you think that's what it's going to mean necessarily to any individual who sees this production? Ultimately, that's to be seen.
Gotcha.
People will make of it whatever they will, depending on where they're coming from spiritually, emotionally, physically, ethnically, sociologically, financially, economically. They're going to make of it whatever they make of it, depending on where they are at the time.
So I would like to say thank you for spending this time with us. But before I do that, is there any speech from the play that you'd like to share with us? You already gave us a quote or two, but is there anything you'd like to share?
Well, the only one I know is a speech that I by heart is one that I won't do, only because it's a speech that really has to be done. It's one of the speeches I do in my show. By the way, just to, you know, you said I can plug myself, so I'll plug a couple of things. I do teach Shakespeare. I teach a private workshop once a week that I've been teaching for years and years and years, like decades on and off. A Monday night workshop, and which I do by Zoom at this point, you know. But until 2 years ago, I did in person. I have created and have performed and hope to perform again a one-man Shakespeare show called Now I Am Alone, in which I perform 28 Shakespeare soliloquies, 28 Shakespeare speeches, literally 27 soliloquies and one sonnet. One of those soliloquies is Bottom's soliloquy from late in the play, I think late Act 4 of Midsummer Night's Dream, in which he wakes up from his apparent dream. He thinks it's a dream, having been a donkey and having been the lover of Titania. He wakes up from that dream and discovers that he's all alone, etc. It's a wonderful speech involving discovery. If people want to watch it, it'll be one of the scenes that are available to watch me in on YouTube. I don't think it's been posted yet, but it's going to be one of those 30 monologues I posted on YouTube, so you can get to see me do it. It doesn't really translate very well just kind of speaking it. It's a real actor's monologue with lots of action and discovery. So see it on YouTube when it. Stay tuned for that.
So they can follow that through Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to your YouTube.
Yes. I think I'm posting 2 of those a month. So not too far in the future, you're going to be able to see that as well as the other speeches.
Very cool.
And you're welcome, Chris.
Oh, this is fun. I like doing this. I hope you do too. So
absolutely, it's been a pleasure.
All right, have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will be back at some point to discuss something else. Sounds cool.
Hope so. Bye. Thanks.
Bye.